Good evening and welcome to Cooperative Vermont. I'm Matt Cropp.
And I'm Eric Davis.
And we're coming to you live from VCAM Studios in Burlington, Vermont this Sunday, July 20th, 2014. And we have a very interesting show this evening.
Absolutely.
We're going to be discussing the seemingly growing trend of mobile home parks, having the residents cooperatively purchase the park and basically run it themselves. And so we have both Jeremiah Ward, who is from the Cooperative Development Institute, to talk about sort of his role in supporting these conversions. And we have Valerie Sicard and Karen White, who are both members and officers at the mobile home park in Milton, which was converted in 2011, I believe?
That's when it started.
Yes, okay. So welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Before we kind of get going, do you guys maybe each want to give a brief introduction to who you are and kind of what your role has been in all of this? Maybe starting with Jeremiah?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Jeremiah. I work at the Cooperative Development Institute, which is a USDA-funded co-op development center that helps startup and existing co-ops with business planning, fundraising, all sorts of co-op development services to those organizations. And we also have a program that's dedicated exclusively to helping residents of mobile home communities buy, run, and fix up their communities. And I was lucky enough to be hired by that program back in 2010, and I've been working there ever since. And I work primarily in Massachusetts and Vermont, but our whole program covers every state in New England except for New Hampshire.
Hi, Karen White, and I'm the president of the co-op. Been president for a couple of years now. Learning a lot. There's a lot to learn. Busy.
And I'm Val Sicard, and I'm supposed to be retired, but I'm not. I am the secretary for our co-op, and I have actually been involved from the beginning. I believe I held almost every position except treasurer, but while we were getting it organized.
So before we get into the sort of details of your guys' experience, do you want to talk a little bit about the sort of history of how this model developed?
Sure, yeah. So this model began in New Hampshire back in the 80s. I can't speak to the specifics of the story, but basically mobile home communities were coming up for sale, and someone had the great idea at the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund to put aside a pool of money and technical assistance and support and training to help the residents buy the community and run it themselves. So it provided rent control, because residents don't have to charge themselves more than what it costs to run a place. It provided them control over their services, who they hire, who they fire, how to run the day-to-day operations. And it also provided residents with the ability to raise money and fix their communities and keep them maintained, because when investors own communities, sometimes they have an incentive to just only do as much maintenance as is minimally required to maximize profit, whereas residents don't have that incentive, so they're more likely to fix and run their communities effectively. So anyway, they did this in New Hampshire once, and then they did it again, and they found that it was working really well, and by the 2000s, over 90 communities had gone from being investor-owned to being co-op owned. And by 2007, 2008, New Hampshire had 25% of its mobile home communities were cooperatively owned and run. So by that point, some people involved in that organization and some other people from outside said, hey, we should model this and we should take it nationwide. And so they created an organization called ROC USA, Resident Owned Communities USA, and they turned it into a network, and they borrowed a lot of the expertise and the documents and the training regimen from New Hampshire, and they turned it into a nationwide program. And on top of that, they did a lot of fundraising, and they got support from big foundations like the Ford Foundation. They got a U.S. Treasury Department equity infusion for this lending arm, and other banks involved eventually, like Bank of America, et cetera, to form Rock USA Capital, which is the bank that goes along with the training and support arm to do this throughout the country. And my organization, Cooperative Development Institute, is one of the members of this nationwide group. And so there's New Hampshire kind of running on their own, and then there's CDI covering the rest of New England, and then there's other sister organizations in the rest of the country.
And so what does the landscape of these community, or these cooperatively owned parks in Vermont look like? How many of them are there? How many residents? That sort of thing.
Okay. I'm no expert, but I can say that there's around 250 mobile home parks in the state. And I believe there's, within those communities, there's 7,000 homes. So it's a decent part of Vermont's housing stock. And yeah, I mean, in Vermont, compared to some other states, they're generally smaller communities. And actually Milton is one of the bigger ones in the state at 100 units. But there's a lot of, from 6-unit communities to 20s and 30s. It's usually around 20 or 30 units. And they're in suburban Burlington, like Milton, to basically practically Canada. Like one of our co-ops is basically a mile from the Canadian border. So there's a wide swath of groups.
How did the interest in Vermont sort of start to build in terms of forming mobile home communities, co-ops?
It was really just a matter of time. Vermont has really good laws in place that make it more favorable for co-op development compared to the rest of the country. In the rest of the country, an owner wants to sell and there's no notice required. The transaction can just happen overnight and no one has to know about it and residents don't have any say. In Vermont, since, I wish I could date it, but since at least the 80s, there's been a statute in place that gives the residents the opportunity to purchase any community that goes up for sale. So if a sale notice goes out that a community is selling for $3 million, like Milton's, the residents have the statutory right to match the terms and conditions of that sale and make an offer to purchase themselves. They get the first dib in that. So it was kind of set up that it was going to work with this program. It was just a matter of making the connection with certain actors in the state, and these different organizations like Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity wanted to develop that because the other option for residents beside being investor-owned is to have nonprofits buy communities, and nonprofits in the state have been running out of funds and don't always have the ability to do it. So when they heard about Rock USA, having this Rock USA Capital, this lending arm, and having this institutional structure in place, they thought it was a great idea and capitalized on it.
And so most of the conversions happen when an owner decides they want to sell, they notice, and then the residents come together and say, okay, we want to cooperate with these different elements, the Rock Capital and all that to own it ourselves. Are there ever examples of it being sort of more proactive of the community members sort of making an offer when the owner hasn't expressed this sort of desire to sell, or is it usually sort of the owner is going to sell and then the offer takes place?
It's usually probably almost always there's an offer in place, and that's pretty much been the great majority of the deals that CDI has done, which we've done 17 in 5 years in Vermont and Massachusetts, because Massachusetts also has these opportunity to purchase laws. But every once in a while, in other states, and every once in a while, we'll encounter a deal where the seller will hear about our program, the owner of the community, and we will start a deal that way without a notice. But I can't think of any off the top of my head where it's just the residents approaching the owner. But I'm sure there's been one in the 150 or so that have been done nationwide. So.
This provides I think a good opportunity to focus in on Milton, and how did that opportunity sort of come about?
we got letters in the mail, and it stated that there was a company interested in purchasing the park, but we knew through one of the persons in the park, she's the one that started this up, Lisa LaBelle, that she got a hold of Sarah Woodward at CVOEO and started the process to talk with the whole community to get people to volunteer to go to the residents door to door. Had it not been for her, we wouldn't be where we are today. I know we wouldn't, but she contacted, we'll get a couple of people involved in it.
Yeah.
And they started going door to door and asking people their thoughts. At first it wasn't a really big hit. People weren't interested. There was another company interested in purchasing the property, and they set up a meeting with us. And we didn't like the answers they gave to some of our questions. They even evaded a lot of questions. They would not even answer the questions. So it was like, wait a minute, we got to do something.
And they,
Sarah Woodward is...
yeah, and they only guaranteed us having, living there for 5 years. So at that point, if they felt that they wanted to sell that property, we would have had to move all of our own units. Everybody would have had to do their own and try to find a place to pick up your trailer and move.
Wow.
It's prime property where we are, and so I think that, we wanted to stay there. And
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, CDI did investigating, and there wasn't many openings in other parks that you could even move your trailer to.
exactly.
That it was maybe 5 out of all the parks in Vermont, if I remember right, that had a space for 100 trailers to have to move, but only 5 areas of going to. It left a lot of people in alert. We had to do this.
And so when you had that meeting with the potential buyer and they told you guys that, okay, you were only guaranteed for 5 years, was that was what really shifted a lot of people who are initially uninterested to sort of start?
That was a lot of it. Plus
Yep.
the rent increase, because they
Yep.
could raise the rent like every year,
Right.
a certain percentage, I believe, but they could do it every year. And so we just took the people that showed up to the meeting for that original company. We just took the information back to our community and let them know what these people had said. Again, walk door to door and let them know the potential of where we could stand at. So then Sarah set up with you guys, with CDI and Rock, to have a meeting, and we all went to that meeting and heard their side of the story and took it from there. Mm-hmm. It was much better for us to purchase the park than it was to worry 5 years down the road where we were going to live.
Yeah.
So
And how much we were going to be
Paid.
charged.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the other thing.
And what did that sort of time frame look like from you kind of having that meeting to incorporating as a co-op? How long did that take you guys?
we had some setbacks. There was a lot of issues, legal stuff that we had to get engineers to come and survey the land. And I think there's 17 to 19 acres. And there was a lot of land to survey, and I think every 2 homes, or every home, there's 2 trailers that are on the same one system of septics and stuff. So there's like at least 50 some odd septics that had to be checked out, investigated, and then your electricity, your water. So it was a lot of work just to get the engineering part of it done. And then they set up other meetings with CDI. You guys came and had a lot of meetings with us about where we were at and what we had to do. Then we got to the point where, okay, now we need volunteers for our board so that we could keep in place what our jobs are to do and how to get to the end of this. So.
Yeah, I'd say from the first notice that the community was for sale to purchase, it's about 5.5, 6 months, maybe 5 months.
Yeah, about
And
that.
yeah, so, but right when the notice goes out, there's a 45-day period for residents to go door to door and get 50% of all the households of the community to say they want to move forward and investigate a co-op purchase. And so I remember that was right down to the wire.
Right.
And
Yeah.
kind of built into that was signing up for membership and scrambling to incorporate pretty quickly. So I know that happened like at the very tail end of that process. And then once they fulfilled that requirement, then there was at the time, it was a 90-day kind of feasibility process where CDI kind of got some expense figures from the town and from the seller and started lining up the engineering and things like that. And then by the end of that 90-day period, that's when the residents kind of had a general idea of what the lot rent would be to do a co-op purchase, and they had to basically make an offer and get a purchase and sales contract started. And then from there it was another
And at
2 to 3
that
months.
time, our lot rent only had to go up $9, I believe,
Yes.
to cover what the budgets and all was going to be.
Yep.
So that it wasn't too bad of an increase, so the people accepted that a lot easier than if it had been way more.
Yes.
So
Yes.
$9 is, David hadn't raised it in 2 years, the previous owner. He hadn't raised it in over 2 years, so it wasn't like, they had just got a lot rent increase just months before that.
When folks got that notice in the mail, what was the sense in the community? Was there, what were people thinking?
I think a lot of people were a little surprised when that they found out that the park was for sale. I think everybody had the same idea, what's going to happen to us.
What's going to happen to us?
And that's, luckily, through that woman that helped at the beginning, she alerted CVOEO, and I think that, almost right from the first meeting, we were listening to them, and like the following week, maybe, not even, we listened to CVOEO's, position on buying, and so I think that's how, it was fast after that. It really was. We had to give it the time, for all the legal stuff, but it moved fast from that point on.
I think the biggest scare there was with the residents is that in 5 years, I can't guarantee we can be here. That I don't think the cost of lot rent or anything was a major issue with that. It was in 5 years you may not have a place to live.
Exactly.
And that was important.
And what was the feeling sort of from the previous owner who was wanting to sell about the idea of it going the co-op way versus going to the other bidder? Was it sort of like getting my money doesn't really matter? Or?
That's about what, yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
because there's a lot of residents that have been there 40 plus years, 25 to 40 plus years that, David grew to know very well, that I think that he was all for us. It was definitely,
Yes.
he would have backed us 100% in the sale versus the other company buying us.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And in terms of the kind of community, the organizing the community piece, going door to door, in terms of the how connected every sort of the people in the community were, was it the sort of thing where pretty much everyone's door was knocked on by someone who they knew, or were there some people for whom this was really the first time that you'd had the conversation with one of your neighbors?
Basically.
It was sometimes the first time you had conversation with these people.
I think when we started that, I knew Karen, and I knew my neighbor across the street, and that was about it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know any of the others, so.
I can be a socialite, so I can go up to anybody anywhere and just start talking about anything. So, I kind of am a shy person, but get me going, probably can't shut me up. And I would just go door to door. And I loved it because I could tell you everybody where they live, who they are.
And she does
I
have,
learned their names, I learned who lived there.
Yeah.
You have to have the personality too, because there was another person that was going around and people wouldn't open the door to him. No way would they open the door to him. He could have stood out there for hours and they would not have talked to him. So it definitely, you got to have a personality, and you got to be well liked, and treat the people with respect if you want to get it. So and that was important.
It sounds like this was potentially an opportunity where the community really came together and grew through these meetings. How did the sort of progress towards forming a co-op? It's a lot of effort involved. How did that happen?
Walking, talking.
Talking, yep.
Walking, talking. Tell your neighbor.
People stopping you and asking you, you know, especially after we formed the board.
The temp board, yeah.
And, you know, it was a little difficult at the beginning because as myself, I work, so I really didn't get to know the people there. And so, you know, it was a learning experience and Karen's much better at that than I am.
It was a learning experience for the whole park.
Yeah.
Everyone had to learn what a co-op was and what it meant for them. And I think it just, and you feel better about yourself and your property, your home, when you own it. And people took a better stance at that they cared more. They care more, they care, and they just, you had mentioned, I don't know earlier in this conversation or not, but community gathering. And we haven't done that because financially we can't go to the people for that. And the co-op doesn't have the money yet to splurge in that sense to cover 100 families and almost 250 residents to provide a gathering of food or whatever. So hopefully one day we can do that and get the people to be closer and more involved and show them that it's really important to have that connection.
Well, you know, it's kind of following up on that, the sort of having gone through this process and, you know, going from something where there was really kind of like one person who was kind of had a lot of that decision-making power and accountability to, you know, a group of residents who are now kind of sort of both accountable but also making those policies. Are there ways in which you feel like the character or feeling of the park has changed as that transition has happened, or has it felt pretty much the same for most people, or
no? No, I think at first it was, again, I really don't want to be negative because, and there is some negativity that goes along with starting up a co-op. Is we had some members on the board that people in the community just did not like at all and didn't trust them. So they kind of kept their doors closed. They didn't want involvement with any of that. So once better people got in there, and I'll say better people because it made a difference. That
rather than have only 2 or 3 that were running the whole thing, it became more of, after we, you know, the first board, as I said, you know, we had to.
A lot of issues.
Yes, a lot of issues, and we had to force another election because people just did not. It was very difficult.
Was it disagreements about things like policies or certain decisions being made or personality clashes?
Well, there was a lot of personality.
A lot of personality, and
yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of decision making is like it was like there was only the certain few, and this was the way it was going to be, and that's it.
And they didn't listen to anyone else. It didn't matter if you had an opinion or not, you know. So.
So it's not all fun and games. To start it out, it's not all fun and games.
And that isn't an unusual case. I've definitely found in being involved in 17 of these at CDI that it's kind of built into the
Are we
program.
Unique?
No, you're not unique.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, you're not unique because I think it's just an inherent part of the situation where if you have to organize in such a short span of time,
Stress.
and you have to quickly get everyone together and create a set of bylaws and create all these documents and pretty much just pick out of whoever seems interested who's going to be the leaders, and you know you have this deadline of when to purchase, you're not going to have everything, you know,
Fall into place.
fall into place
Right
like you want.
away, exactly.
So what happens more often than not is that after the purchase goes through and the dust settles a little bit and people start, you know, reading through their bylaws and reading through all these papers that are part of this process more and understand how the co-op works, all of a sudden they come to the realization that, you know, well, we didn't know this is what it would take, and maybe this leadership isn't right for us. Maybe we have to think about who our leaders should be. And so Milton, like some other groups that I've worked with, basically had to call an election and decide that after the purchase. And it wasn't pretty, and you know.
No, it
It
wasn't
wasn't pretty. Sometimes it still isn't pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We still have issues with a few people that were previous board members, but just ignore that. But just so people know, it isn't smooth sailing from the beginning. You will have hassles. So.
Well, like one other thing you were talking about was kind of the, you know, there's a lot of learning that came with it. What were the sort of skills and sort of things that you needed to learn to be able to make this thing run and happen?
Well, for one thing, I'm going to give kudos to Karen here because she was fantastic in helping right from the beginning. And
Not really
people,
appreciative of some of that, though.
some people only would listen to her because, you know, of the problems that we were having with the other people. And the meetings didn't go so well, and people didn't want to come anymore because of that. And so, you know, it went, as I said, since the beginning, I've been an officer. So it's, at one time or another, I did, you know, I switched hats, so to speak. But as for myself, I said I really didn't know much about the computer. I mean, yes, I could look up things. Yes, I could write a letter on it, that kind of stuff, but had no idea. And still learning all the stuff. And I'm very fortunate. I work at Champlain College. It's my retirement job. I work in the dining hall as a cashier. Love the kids. I have little gurus. They all help me with my cell phone, my iPad, my
Even
computer.
Today, you go to school and you can call them up.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been good in that respect, you know, because if I have a problem, I know those kids are techno kids. They know all that stuff, you know.
But there was
So-
an incident where, being new to the situation, we had a resident, one of their lots was eroding away. So we as a board decided we were going to fill this up,
Yep.
fix this lot, and we did. But we didn't go to the town for permits or any of that, because we didn't know. Okay? So somebody ratted us out. And we got called to the town offices and we're like, didn't have a clue. So that's one thing you do learn is like
Yes.
you got to always involve the town. Now anybody asks
Yep.
me anything, go ask the town if you need permits or whatever. Cause,
Yes, definitely.
But that was a learning experience because now we know when we have to do more work, we have to go to the town and we have to get the permits and, you know, so that was a biggie. We could have been in a lot of trouble and fined, and we got lucky.
Yes.
They didn't fine us, and but that was one of the things that you
I
definitely
think that
learned.
they took
is-
pity on us, especially the two of us, because we both went, and it's like, okay.
I had no clue. I said, but I want to thank, you know, if you see the person, thank them for, you know, reporting us. Because you would have done it again and not
Yeah.
known. So it was like, thank them for, you know, ratting us out. But just the people to go to and you know, the hiring you have to do for this, you know, snow plowing and just different companies that you need, electricians.
Yeah.
There's just a lot to
And
learn.
of course, you know, someone to maintain the septic systems that we have.
Yeah, we had
and
some of those class system, and
Yeah.
I don't recommend them for anybody.
I find this idea of after you guys purchase the property, a new election and the board retention interesting. We've sort of been involved in the inner workings of several different co-ops, but how did that process occur? Was it sort of the community just realized, hey, we need a different leadership, and how did maybe the people who are sort of stepping down or forced out or however, how did they handle that?
Are you a true Vermonter?
Oh,
You
you're
know,
calling me
I-
out here. Actually,
Sorry.
I'm a
Well, and
flatlander.
that's how I want to answer that
Flatlander.
is, we only take so much crap, you know, and then we're going to fight back, and that's what we did.
And that's what we did.
That's what we had to.
It was a matter of seeing what we wanted to work for go down the drain. And I believe it would have, had it
Absolutely. We
continued
would have
the
lost
way.
the park.
Yeah.
We would have defaulted
Yeah.
on our loan and lost this park in just that short amount of time if we hadn't have fought back. We definitely, I don't doubt that for a minute.
Right,
So
yeah.
And so is it the sort of thing where, you know, you had an in-person annual meeting where, you know, the supporters of different people came together and, you know, had spirited conversation
Well-
and then voted there? Or did everyone vote by mail, or how do
No.
you
we
guys do the
met.
voting?
We
We
had
met.
in-person vote.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. It was kind of like we were at the school auditorium and we had
Remember that one?
the us's on this side and the them's on that side. And
Can I take you back to a little story? It's they didn't want me on the board. So, and the original board, certain number of the original board, decided that if you didn't own your home, you couldn't run for the board. Now, I owned my home, but my name wasn't on it. So, thankfully, Val and some other residents in the park, we put butt, and I got my name on my home the day of that election.
Wow.
Yeah.
The day of. I went to the lawyer, did it all legal, everything was up to par. Went to the town, and I says to the guy, this is in effect right now, right? I brought my paperwork to Jeremiah that night of the elections, and I said, I want you to know it is now my home, and I ran for the president.
oh, that
I
went over
the
like a lead
thunder-
balloon.
Oh my God, it was terrible. But the thunder of applause from the people
Yeah.
was like, I won by a landslide.
Oh yeah. I mean, there was
And-
no doubt.
It was just, and there's no going back now. There's no going back. It just,
Yeah.
so it, I loved it. It was a memorable moment, wasn't
And
it?
meanwhile, I had to be the objective arbiter and
Poor Jeremiah.
make sure that, you know,
We didn't come to fight, fist fights.
yeah, that the bylaws are being followed, and that was a, you know,
Parliamentarian.
Yeah, and that was an on-the-spot decision because it does say in the bylaws that you had to be a homeowner, but it didn't say by what time before the meeting you had to
Right.
bring evidence of that. So I ruled. I mean, that seemed. If there wasn't anything saying otherwise, that's okay.
Your
and
name's
yeah,
on it. It's
yeah,
right here in
yeah.
black and white.
But
right?
those
But people
people-
weren't happy that I made
Yeah.
that decision. That's for sure.
Oh no. Oh.
But I would say the majority of the community, as objectively as it can be, you know, did support.
Oh
Oh,
God,
they-
yes they
And,
did.
without
I mean, the
doubt.
numbers spoke
Oh
for
yes
themselves.
they did.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Yeah. They really.
They wanted it.
Yeah.
And there was only a certain few people that knew that I was getting my name on my home. So it came
And that
quite
you
a
was going to
shock.
run for president.
And it was quite the shock for a lot of them. So,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't have it any other way, and I don't think we'd be where we were today if we hadn't went that route.
Yeah.
and since that kind of watershed moment, it's been, I guess I wouldn't say smooth sailing. We had some other challenges
Well,
that came up,
yeah.
but much more.
Personality-wise, though, the board is
Oh,
Yeah.
we're right
we
there.
work together
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and that made a big difference
Yeah,
because
that
more is
was-
getting done.
yeah.
There's no arguing. More work's getting done. We've got things done that nothing was getting done before. So
Yeah, and that was the difficult thing, is that, you know, they assigned the task to themselves, but it wasn't being done. And so, you know, it made it a little
Too
bit
much
difficult.
fighting was
Yeah.
being done for anything to get done.
Yeah.
And that again goes along with, it's not all smooth sailing,
Right.
but I think down the road, anyone interested in purchasing their own mobile home parks as a co-op, do it. Definitely go for
Yeah.
it, because it's going to be worth it. So.
Well, that's a good segue to, I think, how does this process play out at CDI? So there's a notice that this mobile home park is up for sale, and how does the process work at CDI?
So in Vermont, we get notice of a community up for sale from CVOEO, and then we basically hold a first meeting. So as part of the notice, the addresses of all the residents are included in that, and so we basically send out letters saying that this is going to happen. And CVOEO, they kind of will find a resident leader or make phone calls and set that up. And then we kind of go through the whole, there's a spiel, there's a kind of general process to explaining how it works, you know, talking about the New Hampshire experience, just saying that, yeah, you may have heard of other mobile home co-ops in Florida or Massachusetts where to become a shareholder you have to come up with $20,000 or $30,000 to come up with this massive down payment. That's not this program. This program has its own lending arm called Rock USA Capital, which lends 100+% of the purchase price to do everything, and the only investment up front for each member is this $100 share, which you can
For this mobile home park, for this one.
and usually it's $100.
Okay.
So I usually just say it's usually $100. You can
Okay.
set it up to $500, but and in most cases too, it's $100, and you could, at least the beginning members can pay $5 increments until the 100.
Yeah, when it first started,
Yeah.
they were able to either pay it all in one payment, or they could break it down into whatever they could have felt they could afford, from $5 up to whatever.
Yep.
So
yeah, I go through that, I answer any questions, and by the end of the meeting I usually have a general idea of whether a community's into it or not. And like I was saying before, you know, the residents have, within 45 days of when they receive the notice, meeting with me, doing that pitch, and by the end of that 45 days they have to kind of get 50% of them to say, yeah, we want to go to the next step and do a little bit more investigation. We'll make a co-op work, and you know, then we hire the engineer to look at the water and the sewer systems and the electric and see how good or not good it is and how much it's going to cost to fix, and we work with the residents to come up with a board that will do the kind of day-to-day legwork, and collectively we kind of come up with a budget of what it's going to cost, what the lot rent's going to be to make this work, and then towards the end of that process have a membership meeting and kind of just see if the members as a whole will want to move forward or not. And in the case of Milton, they did, because the lot rent had to go up the $9.
Yeah.
But just like I was saying before, the rent hasn't gone up since.
no, it hasn't.
No. And that's, you know, people have, a lot of them are living on a very tight budget. So for them, this is a good thing. You know, I mean, it might be difficult if it has to go up a couple of dollars, but in the long run, it's better for everyone.
But they also understand
Yeah.
that our lot rent cannot be raised unless the community votes
Votes
it.
on it,
So
exactly.
it's not like the board can raise the lot rent, it's a community.
That's
Yes.
interesting.
So, yeah.
Makes it a little bit easier, because that means we're not controlling it, they are.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and that I think helped too with forming this co-op, is you have the say in a lot of things, that it doesn't just happen now for one person that owns the place. It's everyone. So
Sort of talking like that, and also hearing about the election. You know, it almost sounds like it's it's almost a town within a town.
kind of.
Yeah,
And so
it is.
that makes me kind of curious, and also with the zoning thing, kind of like, can you talk a little bit more about kind of what the relationship is between the town of Milton and the park? You know, are there any people from the park who are on the select board? So there's existing relationships, or
There's I'm not sure what part of the board he's on, but we do have a resident. We have a resident who owns a home in our park. Doesn't live in his home, but he owns it, rents it out. That is on the board with the town.
Yeah.
So, because we've had to go up and
Yes.
board meetings too for, you know,
Yes.
approval of plans for our ravine
Right.
and stuff. So he'll usually recuse himself from any comments because he is a homeowner.
Yes.
And-
I've gotten to know some just by having to go there for different things that are co-op involved. So,
And we'll all get to know the town a lot more when we do this massive water and sewer
Oh.
project
Yes.
in the community. So
yeah. But we've had meetings where the Roger Hunt, who was, I guess he has a different position now, but he was the water person, wasn't he? He's come to meetings. We've had Tim Ash come to a meeting. He's the Senate. So, you know, we try to bring in people for our community to hear it directly from those that know what they are talking about. I have no clue on some of that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna
Right.
put in a new pipe.
Okay.
So CDI's done 17 of these in Vermont?
no, 17
In
in
Vermont.
New England.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
okay. What do you generally find is sort of the reaction from the community? Are people sort of excited to hear about this opportunity, or generally need to hear more? What's your thoughts on that?
It varies depending on the context, but I will say it's a weird thing to say, but residents are much more open and willing to put in the time if, like in Milton, there's some sort of threat or fear of a closure or a rent increase that's imminent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's hands down, that's gonna get people organized. And the first co-op we helped convert in Vermont was in Windsor, and it's called Bunker Hill Community Co-op. They got closure notices because they were in a, that's a whole other story, and I was hoping to get Dave here tonight, but basically they were part of a nonprofit that was being bought out by another one, and the nonprofit was basically looking at the situation saying, they're in a floodplain, this is not feasible, just, we gotta close it. And as part of that process, that notice process, we got involved kind of through this, it's the same process as the sale process. And they were just unanimously into
Saving themselves.
saving themselves
Yes.
and saving their homes.
Exactly.
And then other communities where maybe there's no clear idea of whether the seller really has an interested buyer, or there's it's in the middle of nowhere, and the residents think, oh, they're just wanting to get rid of it, but they're not going to be able to sell it. There could be interest, sometimes there is, and sometimes there's just kind of this hesitancy because co-ops are a lot of work, and even if people think themselves that they have the time to do it, they'll say flat out, well, I know my neighbors, they don't have any time for any of this. This is crazy. We just want to pay our rent and just go home.
Can I ask you a question that I just thought of when you said that? Have you ever had a community where they had the opportunity to become a co-op but decided they didn't want to, and then maybe get these foreclosure notices or something and change their mind and come back to you? You ever have anybody do that?
Not that full circle.
Not that first, okay.
We definitely, I would say by the time we do one of those first contact meetings, I think we calculated we have about 80% from that point become cooperatively owned. So it's a pretty good rate. But you know, there's actually the same company that put in an offer to buy Milton. Before we got involved there, they actually had a meeting kind of competing against CDI and the co-op model in Massachusetts, and they convinced the residents to not go co-op. So they
Really?
backed out.
Oh.
Same group.
How
So
are they
there's a
doing
story
now,
there.
do you know?
I don't think they ended up, this Connecticut group ended up buying them.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, they're still, they don't want nothing to do with us for whatever reason. But and then in Vermont, relatively recently, I went to a meeting with a group in Randolph, and I did the pitch from the co-op side, and there was a nonprofit that was interested in buying from, and that gave a pitch from the nonprofit side, and the residents chose the nonprofit route because they didn't want to put the work in to do the co-op. And the nonprofit said, you know, rents will be able to stay the same. I said, well, I can't guarantee that. You know, we have to go through that process together.
Well, yeah.
Personally, I go honesty is better than anything.
Yeah.
So
I was honest, and the residents chose the nonprofit option. But the nonprofit has its own process and had to apply for all these grants to fix and acquire the community, and it took longer than that statutory period I was telling you about. Yeah. And so now the owner of that community is taking an offer from an investor, and so the nonprofit might be out of a deal there because of that different process. And so maybe the residents, in thinking back, would want to do the co-op, or maybe they are still just as opposed as they were from the beginning because it's too much work for them, and that's their decision. So
I'd rather put in the work though, and we do put in a lot of work on. I mean, there might be days that we're just busy, and then have some days where you hear nothing. But to me, to save our homes, any amount of work would be worth it. So.
One other thing I'm curious about is earlier, Jeremiah, you were talking about sort of the difference between the incentive of the kind of owner whose goal is to make as much out of it and so put minimum improvements possible to keep people from actively complaining, versus this incentive of, okay, well, if you know this is your your community, you want to sort of have everything be taken care of well. Has there been sort of any kind of thoughts or visioning or whatever about kind of improvements that now that it's yours, you guys want to see in the more long term? You've got this kind of immediate big project, but like sort of other things. You had mentioned this kind of an office or community space, or like other things that people have talked about thinking that it would be nice to have in the community.
I know some have mentioned that they'd like to put up like a play park for children, so that the kids have something right there on site. That would be down the road, money-wise. That would definitely have to be down the road. Or it could be next year if a new board got voted in and voted on it, I suppose. So, but financially at this point, we really got to think of the stuff that has to be fixed, or it's going to cost more money. Yeah,
that's
you just
where it's
gotta
at
put
right
money
there.
where it's got to be.
Yeah.
And that said, though, using the first year's profit, the membership did vote to, which is kind of an extra thing on top of the bread and butter, water and sewer kind of projects. The members did vote to do the mailbox purchase, which is kind of something that was extra. That was
extra. Because we made a profit.
We made a profit that first year.
And we had a lot of residents complaining because the other mailboxes have been there for I don't know how long, and their mail was getting wet. They were, rotting away, and they'd bring me their mail soaking wet and say, this is what's happening. So with our profit that we made, the community voted to get the new mailboxes. So that was when we did get done and got them up, and we removed trees that were a hazard. We got that job done. So I mean, there were things that got done that definitely fixed up the place in a way that made it look better. But there's still a long ways to go. Yeah. So once the water and sewer get done, I think we're pretty much going to be golden. I do. So.
It is a big project, and I'm
but
sure
once
we'll
it gets
have
started, I don't think it's going to be, it'll get over and done with, and then we just got to pay for it.
Yeah. That's the hard part.
So, but there are a lot of things in place to get done to make the place way better to live at.
And that's why we do updates with the newsletter, so that people can see that we aren't being stagnant, that nothing is being done. Because, like after we finish taking the trees down and some of the septic systems and that kind of thing, nothing looks like it's moving.
Right, they don't
but
see
in
that.
the background, we are moving.
Yeah.
And, they don't see, us being in touch with the
town for
Yeah.
permits, or
The state.
And
you
the
run it,
state,
yeah, the
and,
state,
or the engineers that have to come out and, you know, I mean, I'm getting pretty good in reading those schematics,
Right?
actually.
Learn a
Because
lot.
we have to, you know, it's something that we have to do. So, you know, we're learning
And-
all the time.
And I think that's another thing with this board that we have right now. I think we all have a little bit of an expertise in some of the fields. Like, I know Mike, I have a question on sewer or water, I can go to him, and
Right.
he's pretty smart about knowing.
That stuff, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like there's a variety of people that have different knowledge, and it's great. So I was like, you can't quit because we need you for this. I'm going to make you do this job because I know you know what you're doing, and yeah.
Do you have folks with those sorts of skills in the wider membership too sometimes that you can call on for specific things, or is that mostly just contained within the board?
I don't think
That's
we
a tough question, I
Yeah.
think, because one of our biggest concerns in involving some jobs, I've got a couple that are willing to take down their own trees because they're a hassle, but the board's concern is the insurance part of it. If they get
Right.
hurt, who's reliable? You know, so depending on the situation of getting them involved would boil down to the insurance coverage of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if they want to go out and sweep or, you know, the roadway or something, that'd probably be all right. But if they want to climb a tree and
Cut
start
it
chopping
down.
it down from
Yeah.
the top and letting it just, no, probably not. So,
So, yeah, and I don't think that a lot of them really want to get involved in that area.
again,
Again, there's a lot more work to doing that than they realize. But then on the other hand, like I said, with the newsletters, are able to see that it is getting done. It's just that the process takes longer than, you know, you can't get it done yesterday. So, yeah.
and lots of times I think they understand that. Now with the newsletter that just came out, I already actually received a phone call because part of the newsletter was if you haven't signed a lease, please do so.
Yep.
And I had someone call, so I'm not sure if I'd signed one yet. So I said, well, I'll look into it and I'll let you know. So they work in that aspect too of if we need that done, then this is a reminder for them to
do that.
to see if they have done it. So
And we had to, part of our deal too was everybody, almost everyone in the park heats with Carol. And so we had to have tanks inspected and that kind of thing. And so we had to come up with a form, and then, you know, some people, we were able to have their company sign off and say, well, theirs is safe, you know.
and that was a state
Yes.
regulation, I believe, that they have to have cement pads now. But I
Yes.
think in talking with different people, they all have different answers. Is that if yours is okay and it's not leaking and it's not a hazard of tilting or whatever, then you can be grandfathered in. So, but others that did have an issue where it might leak or it might fall off,
Or if it was
then
on
they
the
had to
ground.
that.
Yeah.
And again, that info would go out in a newsletter
Yeah.
to the whole community, and then you find out from Sarah, from some CVOEO, they could apply for grants.
To have
So
that, yeah.
with having Sarah on that end of it, it's like, look, people, you can go here and ask for a grant, apply for a grant, and have the job done, and it won't cost you anything. So it's good in that sense too, is
Right.
you're helping residents who may not know that there's someone out there that can help them.
Right.
You touched on the sort of the challenges of getting people to sort of take on the board responsibility and, you know, the time commitment that involves. What's participation like around the annual meeting? You know, so you have a lot of members are, you know, really tied to the co-op being, you know, setting lot rent. And is there participation?
I really think the last one we had was the only one that we never had enough people to meet the quorum. And we do believe we had to have it, we were at the school or someplace. And I think the weather is what kept them in.
Yeah.
So we had a horrible
Yeah.
winter,
Yeah.
ice-wise and stuff. And I think that is the reason why we didn't have the participation for that annual meeting. All the other meetings, for elections or whatever, budgets, that we've always had enough people show up for that.
And achieving a quorum at Milton's no small feat. I mean, it's basically 40 households that have to come and fill an
Yeah.
auditorium.
So-
It's not all households, but it's a decent number of people that have
Right,
to
yeah.
get over there and get involved.
And of course, a lot of people work, so we have to make sure we schedule it for when people are home.
Available.
Yeah.
And, you know, we send out letters. We'll post it at the bulletin board up front and let people know if you need a ride. Well, we're willing to pick you up, bring you to the meeting, bring you home. So there's that kind of community interaction too. Is we're there to help if you need the help. So we don't leave anybody stranded. If they want to ride, all they gotta do is call. And in our newsletters, every newsletters will put down the officers' names and the directors' names with their phone numbers generally. So if you needed to get a hold of one of us, that info is
Yeah.
always,
It's there.
been handed out.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Well, we're coming close to the end of the show, but one thing that you did mention, Jeremiah, was that coming up in October is going to be, they're planning a gathering of folks from all these different parks to come together and talk about it. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what the intentions are around that gathering and sort of what it will be?
Sure. So the idea came from a gathering that was held in Massachusetts for the Massachusetts co-ops, because there's now 11 co-ops in Massachusetts, and it was just high time to get everyone together and network. And also, there's just certain questions that come up that I'm a generalist, I can't answer, really specific questions that an engineer or a lawyer some licensed professional has to answer. And so many of those came up, we just came up with the idea down in Massachusetts to have a Q&A session where the boards of these Massachusetts co-ops would, do that. And it went really well, and it was really well received. And then now co-ops are calling up each other, so we thought, let's do that in Vermont. And so the idea with Vermont is to have a summit of all the mobile home co-ops. There's 4 that we helped convert, and then there's 2 others in the state, so 6 total. And to just kind of do a similar thing where it's a networking event, but also a Q&A session with professionals that have answers in specific fields like engineering. And so the first stage in that process is doing a survey to all the board members to see what people they want to have a Q&A session with. So we're in the planning phase, and we'll figure out the location and all that with the answer to the survey.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, any final thoughts from your experience, just for if there's anyone beginning the odyssey that you guys went on, like what things they should keep in mind?
it's not all going to run smoothly. I do want to say that we do have a website that for anybody that may have questions and stuff like that there is a website, and it's MMHC.
Oh, geez.
No.
Look at me.
I'd have to look
It
at
is.
the letter.
It is. It's MMHC
Something dot
Co-op.
Just Google Milton Mobile Home Co-op.
Yeah,
That's the first thing
Google.
that shows.
Yes, Google Milton Mobile Home Parks, and
Yes.
it'll come up because that's
Yeah.
what I had to do. So,
Yeah.
but it's interesting. And we have pictures and different things on there, and there's little sections that you can click on to.
Oh, there it is.
Okay,
Awesome.
there. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, there we are. Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
So they can go
Yeah.
on that site, and if they have questions, and that would help too.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, and look forward to hearing more about your adventures in this conference. But
Hopefully it'll go well, you know.
Yeah, they're always fun.
Yeah.
They are.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank
Yes.
you.
all right, well, you've been
It's
watching
very-
Cooperative Vermont. We do this show every week from VCAM Studios in Burlington. Every other week from VCAM Studios in Burlington, Vermont. I'm Matt Cropp.
And I'm Eric Davis.
Good night.